Hello again guys, welcome back to the channel. This is Comic Kid here again, and today I am super excited to talk about Wonder Woman 1984. Now, before we get started, I do want to emphasize that this is going to be a spoiler-heavy review, and that's mostly because, it's available on a platform that's pretty easily accessible for many people. So, this is your spoiler warning. I will be talking about a lot of specific details about the film, so if you haven't seen it yet and you want to, I would definitely encourage you to come back to this video once you've seen the movie. But this is the spoiler warning, and we're gonna go ahead and get started. Now, right off the bat, I was a little worried about this film. I did enjoy the first one, but I wasn't completely blown away by it. I've never been a huge fan of Wonder Woman as a character in general, though, and so I had my reservations about this one. And while I did enjoy the first one, I did think it was a bit of a basic superhero origin story, but I was definitely happy to see the direction they were taking her character in. And it's also really nice to see some of the setup pieces from the first film kind of continue over into this one, despite such a large time jump between them. But, even as I started the movie, I was a bit worried, especially after all the Themyscira stuff in the beginning. I just felt like the film really kind of slowed down, and there was a lot of kind of strange character tidbits and whatnot, but I really feel like it picked up once Chris Pine re-enters Diana's life. And I don't mean to imply that once they threw in Chris Pine, it suddenly became a better movie. I just feel like at that particular moment and onward, all the exposition from the first half had really kind of come together, and the film had really found its footing. The characters really just ramped up overall from there. And so, as much as I do enjoy Chris Pine as an actor, and as much as I loved him in this movie in particular, that's not why I started enjoying the movie, although I do think that's when everything really ramped up for the overall plot. But I did enjoy the first few minutes, especially spending more time on Themyscira, seeing Diana's culture and history, and just even more of the Amazons being their badass selves. Was just really, really well done, and I loved that whole opening sequence. And so while it was off to a strong start, it did kind of lose me once we were actually set in 1984. There were just a few things that I kind of didn't agree with or thought could have been done better. Particularly with Kristen Wiig's Barbara Minerva character. I get that it's supposed to feel like an 80s movie, but I just felt like her setup and original depiction was just so stereotypical, and I feel like we'd definitely seen her villain before, and in my opinion that's not quite really where Cheetah is supposed to be, or at least the type of character that Barbara Minerva is supposed to be. I definitely like how she started off as friends with Diana in this and eventually worked her way to being enemies. I just felt like the whole misunderstood nerd that no one ever really pays attention to could have at least been done better. And then even the action sequence early on, in the mall, I just wasn't blown away. Not some of the best superhero action I'd ever seen, but at least in my opinion, that was one of the weakest action sequences in the entire film. And it was definitely cool to see a lot of the action later on as, the film progressed. But we'll talk a little bit more about the bad first and foremost, because really that beginning stuff was the only bad that I thought about the film. Even Pedro Pascal, for as much as I love him and whatnot as an actor, and with The Mandalorian being so popular now, I felt like he was a little rocky in the beginning, but as time went on, you grow to love him as a villain, and Kristen Wiig's Cheetah especially gets significantly better as well. Now, I wouldn't really call this a bad thing, but it's definitely something that some people might complain about, and it's that it is a fairly inaccurate comic book movie, particularly in regards to the villain. For those of you who don't know, Maxwell Lord's abilities are almost always purely telekinetic, and not magical or anything. And so, while I thought Pedro Pascal still did a great job in the film overall, I do think they could have probably done a bit more with Pedro Pascal's Maxwell Lord, at least in his relation to his comic book counterpart. That said, I did think that, the way they spun him was a good way to bring Chris Pine's Steve Trevor back in a believable way and really kind of hammer home some of the themes, especially in regards to Diana herself, that take place as the film goes on. And then in regards to Barbara Minerva and Kristen Wiig's Cheetah, they kept the core of the character there. I admittedly don't know too much about her, but I do think that they could have definitely done a bit more, especially with her in the beginning. I've never known her to be such a, whiny and lost character, and so really the beginning is the only complaint that I have with her. But like I said, as soon as Chris Pine enters the film and is back as Steve Trevor, everything just really kind of takes off from there for the film overall. Now, to get into some of the good, and at least I've been told that humor in comic book films doesn't quite stick with me, and usually I've noticed when everyone else is in the theater laughing, I am generally not. But this movie did make me chuckle a few times, and so seeing Chris Pine kind of react to his future and everything around him, I did think had some pretty humorous moments. And given Kristen Wiig's comedic background, I was actually pretty pleased that they didn't just give her all the comedic moments. You definitely see Kristen Wiig kind of branch out of her comfort zone in this film, and especially if that was her moving as Cheetah in the end, then I definitely applaud her for that, because overall I did think Kristen Wiig did a very good job in this movie. Now, as far as the overall casting, I think everyone did a really, really good job. Like I said, I was worried about Kristen Wiig and Pedro Pascal in the beginning, but especially with Pedro Pascal at the end, he is easily one of the strongest comic book movie villains, at least in my opinion, and I hope a lot of other people think so too, because the man is just a phenomenal actor and did a great, great job as Maxwell Lord, even though he's not the most comic accurate one. Now, as far as Kristen Wiig's Cheetah goes, I just wish they had done a bit more with her at the end. I feel like they just missed a few details that really could have made her a great comic book villain. I thought she had a great place within the narrative of the film overall, but by the end, I just think they could have done a little bit more with her. And so I'm hoping they find some way to kind of round her character to a more fitting end. I was definitely thankful that she improved so significantly by the end. And then of course, Gal Gadot as Diana and Wonder Woman was amazing, and Chris Pine, back as Steve Trevor, but we did kind of know what to expect from those two performances. And so they fit great within the film. Gal Gadot actually got a chance to show a bit more range of emotion for Diana in this, especially by the end. And so at the end when she's talking Pedro Pascal's Maxwell Lord down from his scheme, I just thought that was a great, great job on Gadot's part. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the fight sequences after the mall I just absolutely loved. There were a few bits that looked a bit wonky. Maybe it's because I watched it at home and not in the big screen, but there were a few details that I noticed looked a little, inconsistent or maybe even unnatural. But I mean, it wasn't enough to really pull me out of the film. But I loved the car chase scene, and the fight in the White House Hall was absolutely incredible. And especially the fight with Cheetah at the end, I thought looked great. I even thought Kristen Wiig's Cheetah looked great, and I was a little worried based on the merchandise that I'd seen, but I think, in all honesty, no matter how they did Cheetah, something was gonna look a bit off. And I do think they did everything they could as far as her overall look went, but seeing her actually move in live action was a lot better than I initially expected. As far as the soundtrack goes, Hans Zimmer came out of superhero movie retirement to do this one, and I thought the score was pretty good overall. In all honesty, I didn't think this was his most memorable work, but you know, it definitely fit the theme of the film and kind of the tone and stuff like that. I did think it was great to hear his version of the Junkie XL theme for Wonder Woman from both BVS and the first movie. And so seeing kind of the variant of that same song twice throughout the film, I just really enjoyed that Hans Zimmer like spin on it. That said, you also see, or I guess hear, a variant of Beautiful Lie, which Zimmer did for Batman v Superman. And that plays during Wonder Woman's like talk with Maxwell Lord as well as the rest of the planet. And so hearing that song play as Diana is talking about truth and all of that, I just thought was perfect. And that is easily one of my like favorite musical pieces just from a movie like overall. And so hearing kind of a reprise of it at that moment, I just absolutely love. And then there is a post-credits scene, for those of you who don't know. It doesn't really set up anything as much as it's more of a nice little detail, but seeing Linda Carter again, just kind of involved in the DC universe in any way, was an incredibly welcome experience, and I thought that was a wonderful, wonderful way for them to incorporate her. And then there are also plenty of like small little, just like great moments just sprinkled throughout the film, especially with the invisible jet scene and seeing her and Steve Trevor just flying around and all the fireworks are going off. It was just absolutely beautiful, and I love how Patty Jenkins did that whole sequence. Like, it was just incredibly well done. Now, it does kind of set up some plot holes for Justice League. We'll kind of have to see how Zack Snyder's Justice League will play out, I'm assuming, but at least in that it always looked like Wonder Woman could fly, but never really did. By the end of this film, you know, it's pretty clear that, yeah, she can definitely fly. I did think that certain elements were a bit of a stretch as far as, like, Wonder Woman turning the jet invisible, but it is believable, and so, you know, especially given her background and who her father is, they come up with a fairly flimsy excuse to do it, but it's still a pretty solid one nonetheless. But overall, I very much enjoyed this film. I'd probably say that I preferred it to the first one. There are definitely things that the first one does better than this one still, but I mean, aside from that like half-hour chunk kind of in the beginning, I didn't really have any major complaints about this movie, and I was entertained, and I'm definitely excited to see where they go with the third one. That said, I do kind of hope they put the third one in a more modern setting. I would love to see what Diana can do or has learned, you know, after her involvement in the Justice League, but I'm excited for more. I would say I preferred it to the first one. Overall, I'd give the film probably an A-, B+, kind of around there. And while it's still not my favorite DCEU movie, I definitely enjoyed it, and I hope y'all did just as much as me. But let me know what you guys think of Wonder Woman 1984 down in the comments section below. Be sure to hit like and subscribe, and I will see you guys again real soon.